Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi ala ni'matil islami wa kafa biha nema. All praise and gratitude be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His blessing of Islam, which suffices as a blessing. I'd like to welcome you all on the 9th talk. We are at Para 5 and we are going to be doing Surah Nisa, and we'll do from ayat number 24 to ayat number 86. As you recall, we spoke last time also on some of these ayahs which will be continuing on in Surah Nisa. The portion of Quran that we will be reading today will focus on marriage. It will focus on family relationships. If we think about the last ayah, which was ayah 23, it identified the relationships with whom marriage is disallowed, and we're going to continue on with the similar ayah, which is ayah number 24. Now, also what we're going to talk about is that if a situation arises in home where the marriage cannot be maintained, what are the options open? So we look at some ayahs relating to that, and then also we would see some ayahs about financial transactions, how important they are, how important it is for us to be honest, and what are the consequences of dishonesty. So let's just begin with the first ayah of this evening, which is ayat number 24 of Surah An-Nisa. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Wal muhsanatu minan nisa'i illa ma malakat aymanukum kitaballahi alaykum wa ukhilla lakum ma wara'a dhalikum an tabtaghu bi amwalikum muhsinina ghayra musafihin. And Allah has prohibited all married women except those that your right hand possess, and lawful for you are all besides these, provided that you seek with your wealth for honest wedlock, not lust, since you derive benefit from them. Give them their meher as prescribed, and there is no blame on you in what you mutually agree after what is appointed. Surely Allah is all hearing, all wise. So here, as you can see this ayat, there is one more prohibition that's coming in line of the ayat number 23, where lots of relationships where marriage is disallowed. And so continuing on with that in ayat 24, Allah has also prohibited all married women. So no, a man cannot marry a woman who is already married with someone else. Secondly, I think you can see from this ayat giving this commandment, give them their meher. Now, unfortunately, when we look at our own society, men and their families in our country, in our culture, have become so dishonorable that rather than giving meher, they've started to expect jahez from their wives. And that's a serious issue, because when the system goes upside down, it has very serious consequences for the entire society. The first word that's used over here in this ayat, wal muhsanatu minan nisa. So the word muhsanat is a woman who is fortified, a protected woman. So it has a number of meanings. It means a married woman, it means a chaste woman, it means a free woman. And here the meaning is in context of a woman who is married. Now, obviously we all know that the husband and a wife relationship, a family, that's a cornerstone of civilization. And the institution of marriage, Islam spends so much time in promoting this and preserving this institution. And then Quran goes on to say in the second part of this ayah that you seek with your wealth for honest wedlock and not lust. So instructions over here being given to Muslim men that they shouldn't really be spending their money seeking immorality. Instead, they need to spend their money creating families and strengthening the moral fiber of the society and of the family. And whoever cannot afford to marry free women, let them marry those whom your right hand possess, and Allah knows best concerning your faith. You are from one another. You are from one another means men and women, they are same, they are equal. In the eyes of Allah, they are equal. You are from one another. So marry them with the permission of their owners and give them meher in an equitable manner, justly. They should be chaste, not lustful, nor as secret love companions. And when they are married, then afterwards become guilty of immoral conduct, they shall suffer half the punishment to that which is for a free woman. This permission is for him among you who fears to commit sin. But if you have self-restraint, it is better for you, and Allah is forgiving and merciful. So you can see from these last two ayahs that I just gave the translation, don't undermine even a kaniz. Even a kaniz, we don't have slaves now, alhamdulillah, this thing has been abolished. But for even a slave girl, Quran says she is a human being. She is equal in the sight of Allah. She is equal to you in many ways. So give her a meher when you marry her. Even if you are marrying a Kaniz, you need to give a meher to her. And then Quran also completely prohibits something, and it uses the word lustfulness nor as secret companion. So this is something which is completely disallowed, that Muslim men should actually seek women for lustfulness or for a secret companionship or love affairs. Now, since the slaves did not have protection of a family, therefore the punishment for a slave girl, should she commit a sin, was half. It was reduced half to that of a free woman. And Allah wants to explain to you and guide by the example of those before you, and to turn to you in mercy, and Allah is all-knowing and all-wise. So nikah has always been a way. Living together is a recent phenomena where women are seriously exploited, and they are the most, within living together, they are most insecure. So this institution of marriage that has been established in the society is there to strengthen the family life. Weakening it, abolishing it will only result in exploitation of women. They are at the losing end. It will give rise to insecurity in women, and they always lose in such an arrangement. Allah wants to turn to you in His mercy, whereas those who follow their lust want you to drift away, far away, a tremendous deviation. So people who have been opposing these laws, they have been opposing these laws for centuries, and they have old prejudice for that. They have old customs there. So, concerning the share of a daughter in inheritance, the freedom of a widow to marry, the prohibition of marrying step-brothers and step-sisters and foster sisters. These are all things that people have always been, for centuries, because they have prejudice, and it's very difficult for them to suddenly understand how can a woman also get right in inheritance. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَن يُخَفِّفَ عَنْكُمْ وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. And Allah wants to lighten your burden, for men have been created weak. So, this ayat over here, وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا, for men have been created weak. Allah informing us He is our creator. He knows us best. So once man accepts that he has been created weak, he will not make this life as a wrestling match by going near temptation. We don't need to go near temptation, because Quran and other places say these are limits set by Allah, therefore do not go near Him. Because the issue is that sometimes it becomes impossible after you've reached a certain point. You reach to a point of no return. So Quran says know your limits, understand your weaknesses, and don't even go near these limits that Allah has set. O you who believe, do not devour one another's possession wrongfully, except it be by trade, by mutual consent, not kill yourselves. Surely Allah is merciful to you. So this ayat really highlights the importance of financial transactions. Those who devour property unlawfully, they are leading to their own destruction. Quran says this is like killing your own self. Because if there is loss of confidence in the society and business relationships are in chaos, this will lead a loss for everyone. And whoever does that in aggression and injustice, then we will drive him into fire, and that for Allah is easy. So punishment for those people who devour property of others, or who do irregularity in financial transactions, who commit fraud, who commit coercion, Quran says Allah will drive them into hell, and that will be a serious punishment for these people. If you avoid major sins which you are forbidden, we will remove from you the lesser sins and admit you to honorable places in paradise. So Allah is our well-wisher, and He forbids such deeds which cause our ruin. What are these major sins that Quran is referring over here? Well, to begin with, any sin which we know is a sin, but we continue to do that sin and not ask Allah for forgiveness, even a small sin can become a major sin. But how Sharia defines major sin are, number one, violation of rights of Allah, that's a major sin. A violation of the rights of parents, that's a major sin. And violations of right of other human beings, these are also sins. So even violation of those relationships which bring peace to the family, or peace of a family being compromised, like adultery, they are also major sins. And do not hanker for the bounties which Allah has bestowed more abundantly on some of you than the others. For men, is a share of what they have earned, and for women is a share of what they have earned, and ask Allah for His bounty. Indeed, Allah is ever knowing of all things. So here you can see this great advice being given by Quran, and that is don't grudge the possessions of other people, because this is only going to create jealousy inside you. It is going to create class struggle. There will be unhealthy competition. There will be conflict in the society. You desire those things. You want to be like that. You want to have such bounties. Pray to Allah. He's the one who is the giver of all bounties. Then this ayat also says, for men is a share of what they have earned, and for women is a share of what they have earned. Women and men are given shares alike. In the eyes of Allah, they are treated equally. And for everyone, we have appointed heirs of what the parents and their near relatives leave behind. And those to whom you have tied your pledge, give them their shares. Surely Allah is a witness of all things. So inheritance must be divided according to the law that has been prescribed by Allah, not according to our needs, not according to our friendships, not according to our brotherhood or anything. Shares of some are more in inheritance than the other, and this is according to also the wisdom of Allah. We don't need to use our logic as to why Allah chose to give a higher share to a husband and a lesser share to a wife, or why the share of a male is double that of a female. We don't need to use our logic. This is something which Allah has specified very clearly. But also please remember that breaking the rules of inheritance is a major sin. الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله. Men are a protector and maintainer of women because Allah has made them excel the other, because they spend out of their property, and the righteous women are truly devoted who guard in their husband's absence what Allah would want to be guarded. As for those women from whom you fear rebellion, admonish them, then leave them alone in the bed, then hit them. Then if they obey, do not seek a way against them. Surely Allah is high, exalted and great. Now this ayat, obviously people have done so much tafsir on this ayat, and you hear all these modern scholars being so apologetic when they try to interpret this ayat. We don't need to be apologetic. We are here to only convey Allah's message. I can't use any other word which Allah has written in the Quran. Allah uses the word وَضْرِبُهُنَّ, hit them. That's the way that it is over here. I can't use the word that Allah wants us to discipline them, because that's not the meaning of the word that is used over here. Now, before I reach to the second part of this ayah, let me just actually talk about the first part, because that's where it all starts up. It says ar-rijalu qawwamun. So, word qawwamun being used over here. Qawwamun is one who makes arrangements, who takes up responsibility, signifies that man as a husband has a responsibility. And what responsibility he has? He has responsibilities for financial maintenance. He has responsibilities of physical protection of his family. He has moral responsibilities. Now imagine a husband. A husband has to really struggle to bring food to the table. He has to take part in jihad to protect the family. He has tremendous responsibilities. And in any case, in any house, we cannot have two heads. No organization works efficiently with two heads. So in a husband and wife relationship, the husband has an upper hand. And the reason for that is also that men have been endowed with certain natural qualities, and they are physically more powerful. Not in the sense that they are above in honor or excellence. In honor and excellence, everyone is equal. It depends on our taqwa, what honor and excellence we have. But men have also added responsibilities beside being provider. They will also be questioned upon the moral deeds of the wife. But a wife will not be questioned about the moral deeds of the husband. And this ayat goes on to say, as for those women from whom you fear rebellion, admonish them, then leave them alone in bed, then hit them. I've used lightly over here, and that's my own interpretation. Now, you see the word first Quran uses nushuz, that in women where there is nushuz, this is instead of being respectful, they become aggressive, they become violent. So what are the options that are available to men? The first option, wise. Say words which soften the heart. Be polite with them. Be kind with them. Be gentle with them. Give them a counsel. Give them an advice. it doesn't work. The next option that you have, then leave them alone in bed. It's not, men are not instructed to turn them out of the room. Don't throw them out. Instead, you leave the room. Then leave them alone, which means you leave the room and you move out into the next room. Now, if any wife has any love or regard or respect, this indication will be enough for her. However, if the rebellion just continues, if the aggression just continues, what option is left in order to save the family, in order to save the peace of the house? A shock treatment. Ibn Abbas said, hit them with a miswak. Now, to be permitted is one thing, and to use an extreme measure is completely different. This is just one of the tools in the toolkit. This is just one of the tools. It doesn't mean that we have to use this tool. No sane man will use a sledgehammer. A sledgehammer is part of our toolkit to kill a fly. So in any case, beating is not for revenge. It's not for taking our anger out. Today, I completely agree, there is a huge amount of a problem in societies, not just in Muslim society, but more so in Western society, where beating of women does take place, but that's not for correction. That's because of drug abuse. That's because of alcohol. That's because of uncontrollable anger. That's because of exploitation. But this extreme measure is there only to save marriage. Please remember our Prophet ﷺ, in his life, he never physically punished any of his wives. So please think that this beating that is being mentioned over here, this is not like a vitamin. This is like a drug, life-saving drug, which one does not have to use unless there is no other option available. But if you fear a break between the two, appoint an arbitrator from his people and an arbitrator from her people. If they both desire correction, Allah will bring about harmony between them. Surely Allah is ever knowing and Allah is ever aware. So Quran advising the process of reconciliation before resorting to the court, before going into divorce, by appointing an arbitrator from the side of the husband and side of the wife. Maybe they can settle things down between the two. Maybe they can become counsel before the two. The next ayat, and worship Allah and do not subscribe any partner to him. Do good to your parents, to the near kins and the orphans and the needy and the neighbor who is your kin and the neighbor who is not your kin and the companions in journey and the wayfarer and what your right hand possesses. Surely Allah does not love the conceited and the boastful. Do positive, constructive things. First and foremost, do not ascribe any partner to him. The first thing for us is stay clear of shirk. Shirk has resulted in exploitation of people. All people have direct relationship with Allah. We can directly, pray to Allah. We don't need any intermediary. The most important thing being mentioned over here, utmost position is in hukukul ibad. Within them is the supreme standing, is the status of our parents. It is not just tolerating parents, but instead Quran instructs, do ihsan on them, do loving care of them. In a hadith, our Prophet ﷺ was asked, O Messenger of Allah, what are the rights of parents on their children? And you know what the Prophet responded? He said, they are either your heavens or your hell. So you can actually earn your heavens and hell in this world by treating your parents either with loving care or with being aggressive with them. In another hadith, our Prophet ﷺ said, the approval of Allah is in the good opinion of the father, and Allah's displeasure is in the displeasure of father. Next, Quran instructs us about the rights of relatives to the near kins and the orphans and the needy and the neighbor who is your kin and the neighbor who is not your kin. Now, it's a very strange thing that Quran should instruct us to help our kins and our relatives, because there is a human tendency that people are more willing to spend money on strangers but unwilling to spend it on their own relatives. And this must be because there is a concealed desire in people that things that they do, they like to do things where they have a prospect of being at least praised. They have a prospect of being admired and acknowledged and thanks. And sometimes relatives are people who think it is their right and they would never come and acknowledge it or thank you. And often we see that relatives would take it for granted. They think it's their right to ask because they are conscious, they are knowledgeable about the financial status of the family. They know who are rich people, and so they feel that this is their right to ask them. Now, the fastest way a society can transform is if people begin to take care of their close relatives and the needy people first within their own family. I think it's so important for us. We need to create awareness about the rights of relatives in our children. We shouldn't belittle relatives in front of our children, because their behaviors towards their relative will be reflected of the views that the parents hold for the relatives. Next, Quran talks about the rights of neighbors. In a hadith, our Prophet ﷺ said, Hazrat Jibreel alayhi salam reminded me about the rights of neighbors so many times that I thought that they may even get a share in inheritance. The rights of temporary neighbors is also emphasized, and the companions in journey and wayfare. Your behavior in people who are your companion in journey, like you're sitting next to someone, your behavior should not be to annoy them. That's what Quran is teaching us. Look at the fine point Quran goes down to build relationship. And finally, Quran mentions, and surely Allah does not love those who are full of self-conceit and act in a boastful manner. And how is self-conceit and boastful manner evident from our behavior? When we hold low opinion about people, especially those who are dependent on us. If we hold low opinion, which means that we have self-conceit, we are prideful people, we have boastful manner. In a hadith, our Prophet ﷺ said, a person who has in his heart a faith worth of a weight of a mustard seed will not go into hell. So if we have faith in our heart of a mustard, he'll not go to hell. And a person who has in his heart arrogance worth the weight of a mustard seed will not go into paradise. So really no arrogance. There should be no arrogance in our hearts, and our behavior should not be a behavior of self-conceit and boastful manner. Those who hoard up their wealth and enjoin upon others stinginess and conceal what Allah has given to them out of His bounty, we have prepared for the disbelievers a humiliating punishment. Bukhul, miserliness. And miserliness can be in anything. It can be in wealth. That's the most apparent. But people are even miser in knowledge. People are miser in time. They don't want to spend their prime time with, helping someone out. There are exclusive clubs all around, which they say entry for such and such is banned. Now people even do bukhul in recipes. They have a good recipe and they'll keep it a secret and not share. That's the level of bukhul that bukhul has penetrated in our societies. And also those who spend their wealth to be seen by Allah and not to believe in Allah, nor in the last day. And he who takes the shaitan as a companion, what a dreadful companion he is. So instead of seeking pleasure of Allah by spending in His way, people are spending money to impress others, for show on. The extreme of this is obviously tabzir, which is being extravagant, to use money for show off, to use money to dominate people. There is no harm spending money for comfort or for beauty. Allah is beautiful, He loves beauty, but certainly not for ostentatiousness. So between miserliness, between being very tight-fisted and then the other extreme is ostentatious, there is a middle path, which is what is desirable, which is what Quran is teaching us. And what harm would come upon them if they believed in Allah and the last day and spend out of what Allah provided for them, and Allah is ever knowing of them. Indeed, Allah does not do injustice even as a weight of atom or of particle, while if there is a good deed, He multiplies it and gives from Himself a great reward. So how will it be when we bring from every nation a witness, and we bring you, which means referring to our Prophet ﷺ, against these people as a witness? So our Prophet ﷺ being brought as a witness against us. We are always hopeful of shafaat of our Prophet ﷺ on the Day of Judgment, while the reality could be very different depending upon our deeds. And the Prophet may be presented as a witness against people. He may say, I passed on this message, but these people just didn't pay attention, didn't spread that message, didn't understand, didn't follow the message, didn't follow the guidance. That day, those who disbelieved and disobeyed the messenger will wish that the earth would swallow them, and they will not conceal from Allah anything. What a day of utter embarrassment. O you who believe, do not approach prayers while you are in a state of intoxication, until you know what you are saying, nor if you need a bath, except when you are traveling till you have bath. And if you are ill or on a journey, or one of you comes in from the place of relieving himself, or you have associated with women and find no water, then seek clean earth and wipe your faces and your hands with it. Indeed, Allah is ever pardoning and forgiving. So this is the second commandment about intoxication. We had looked about an early commandment in Surah Al-Baqarah. Now, Quran forbids use of intoxicants at all time, not just prayers. And as we proceed on, this prohibition is progressive, and we will see the final of this prohibition coming in later on. The word used, sukara, over here states, it signifies state of intoxication which prevents man from using his full intellectual faculties. Now, Quran permits tayammum, and this is what it is said over here, and then seek clean earth and wipe your faces and your hands with it. This is an alternative to wuzu, when water is not available and we cannot do wuzu and we cannot do ghusl, and we need to do ghusl because it's required for us to do ghusl. If water is not available, then you can actually do tayammum, because at least it keeps the spirit of feeling clean alive, that feeling of cleanliness and the sanctity of prayer. So you can actually do tayammum as the Quran allows it over here. And have you not seen those who were given a portion of the book purchasing error in exchange for it, and wishing you would lose the way? The earlier revealed books were not complete, only Quran is the complete book. Now the objective of the people of the book who have been given a book, but a portion of the book, is to mislead and to lead Muslims astray. You can see this all over the place. You can see in different magazines and different talk shows. You hear these slogans like give God what is God's and give Caesar what is Caesar's, so that religion becomes a theocratic facade. It's just a facade where behind people do what their nafs tells them to do. And Allah is most knowing of your enemies, and sufficient is Allah as a friend, and sufficient is Allah as a helper. Of the Jews, there are those who change the word from their context and say, we hear and disobey, and hear as one who hears not, Raina, distorting with their tongues and slandering the deen. If they had said, we hear and we obey, and do hear and do look at us, it would have been better for them and more upright. But Allah has cursed them for their disbelief, so they will not believe except a few. So this ayat actually describes the attitude of the Jews towards our Prophet ﷺ. When commandments of Allah were recited, they would say in front of the Prophet, Samena, we have heard. And then in their very low voice, they would use a word, and they asaina. Very gently they would say, asaina, which means we have heard but we have disobeyed, because they never really came with the intention of understanding. So this is a sublime method of falsification. Just change the word, twist the tongue, and have double meaning to that. O you who believe, O you who have been given the book, believe in what we have sent down, confirming that which is with you, before we obliterate faces and turn them on their backs, or curse them as we curse the Sabbath breakers, and the commandment of Allah is always executed. Inna Allah la yaghfiru an yushrika bihi wa yaghfiru ma duna dhalika liman yasha wa man yushrik billahi faqad iftara isman azima. And indeed Allah does not forgive associating with Him. So look at this ayat. Allah does not forgive associating with Him, but He forgives what is less than that for whom He wills. And he who associates with Allah has certainly fabricated a grave sin. So this Iman in one God, this being free from shirk, is such a freeing concept. In sense of that we don't have to depend on man. We are not dependent on anyone else, alive or dead. Shirk is so exploitative. It is so exploitative that I would urge you to go to a mazar yourself and witness the exploitation of poor people that happens in a mazar because of the manifest shirk that takes place in such places. Alam tara ila allazina yuzakkuna anfusahum balillahu yuzakki man yashau wala yuzlamuna fatila. And have you not seen those who praise themselves to be pure? Praising themselves to be pure. Rather, Allah purifies whom He wills, and they will not be wrong even as much as a skin of a date stone. Warning to people the danger of self-righteousness. You sometimes develop this attitude of holier than thou. That's the attitude. So this excessive self-purification, excessive self-righteousness, having self-righteousness written on your sleeve. There's a very beautiful dua of our Prophet ﷺ where our Prophet said, "O Allah, make me see myself small in my own eyes and high in the eyes of others." And that really sums it up. That in our own eyes we must feel that we really need mercy of Allah. We must ask Allah for forgiveness because we are sinful people. That's the thing that will make sure that we don't become self-righteous. Look how they invent lies about Allah, and that itself is a manifest sin. And have you not seen those who were given a portion of the book who believe in the superstition and false objects of worship, and they say about the disbelievers, these are more rightly guided than the believers. Now let's look at the first part of this ayat. The word used over here is jibt. Jibt is anything which is without foundation, things that are completely unreal, and it includes things like magic, it includes sorcery, it includes divination, which is throwing arrows or taking fal, omen taking, superstition. These are all jibt. And then you see the last part of this ayat, it says, and say about the disbelievers, these are more rightly guided than the believers. These are what they say. This is their disdainful attitude towards believers. You see hypocrites all over the place. Sometimes, there was a time I heard somebody say, Hindus are better than our Maulvis. Hindus are much better than our ulama. What a statement. If you see this is exactly what Quran is saying. And they say about the disbeliever, they are more rightly guided than the believers. This should not be the case at all. Those are the ones whom Allah has cursed, and he whom Allah curses, you will never find for him a helper. Or have they a share in the kingdom? Then if that was so, they would not give people even as much as a speck. Or are they jealous of people for what Allah has given them of His bounty? But we had already given the family of Ibrahim the book and wisdom, and conferred upon them a great kingdom. فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ آمَنَ بِهِ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ صَدَّ عَنْهُ وَكَفَى بِجَهَنَّمَ سَعِيرًا. And some of them believed in it, and some of them disbelieved in it, and hell is sufficient as a place for their burning. So to believe or not to believe is the choice that people are making, and that's the reason why some people will be punished and others will receive a reward. Indeed, those who disbelieve in our verses, we will drive them into fire. Every time their skins are burned, we will replace them with other skins so that they may taste the punishment. Indeed, Allah is ever exalted in might and wisdom. Endless punishment of such people, endless punishment. When their skins are burnt away, Allah will replace it with another skin so that they can have this long-lasting suffering. But those who believe and do righteous deeds, we will admit them into gardens beneath which rivers flow. In them they will abide forever. For them in it are pure spouses, and we will admit them to deepening shades. Indeed, Allah commands you to return deposits to their owners, and when you judge between people, to judge with justice. Excellent is that which Allah instructs you. Indeed, Allah is ever hearing and seeing. Now this ayat, the Quran talks about merit, Quran talks about justice, it talks about honesty. Amanat is anything which has been given, which has been entrusted to us, must be returned back to their owners. But justice at all stage, at personal level and at state level. O you who believe, obey Allah and obey the Messenger and those in authority among you. And if you disagree over anything, refer it to Allah and His Messenger if you believe in Allah and the last day. And that is a better way and better in terms of result. So allegiance and obedience to anyone acknowledged is if it does not oppose the allegiance to Allah and His Messenger. But Quran makes it mandatory that people are, the obedience of people who are in authority. So people who are in authority over us, it is mandatory for us that we obey them. We need to obey the laws of the country we live in. There is no room of rebellion in Islam. You can leave the country. You can work to change, but you cannot be rebellious. That's something that is not permitted at all. Have you not seen those who claim to believe in what has been revealed to you and that which was revealed before you? and their desire to go for judgment in disputes to false deities, though they were commanded to reject them, and Shaitan desires to mislead them far astray from the right. And when it is said to them, come to what Allah has revealed to His and to the Messenger, you will see hypocrites turning away from you in aversion. Then when misfortune falls on them on account of what their hands have sent before, then they would come to you swearing by Allah, we meant no more than good and conciliation. These are the one on whom Allah knows what is in their hearts. So keep clear of them, admonish them, and speak to them what has impact on their soul. Only Allah knows those people who are true Muslims and those who are hypocrites. We don't need to be judgmental about other people. We need to look at our own selves. But the right way of dealing with such people is, Quran says, show forbearance towards them, caution them, and speak with them things which will have impact on their hearts and on their soul. And we did not send any messenger but that he should be obeyed by Allah's permission. And if they had, when they had wronged themselves, come to you and ask for forgiveness, and the messenger had asked for forgiveness for them, they would have found Allah most forgiving and merciful. So the first part of this ayat, and we did not send any messenger but that he should be obeyed by Allah's permission. That's the thing. That messengers were sent, our messenger, our prophet was sent to teach people to how to conduct our life. In a hadith, our Prophet ﷺ said, none can claim to be a believer unless one subordinates one's desires to the way that I have brought. So the position of a messenger is defined forever. He is not sent so that people just merely acknowledge him as a prophet. He is a messenger, and we have to really obey him. And people just cannot just go about obeying anyone else that they like. They have to obey the messenger, because the messenger's way of life must be followed. Know by your Rabb, they will not believe in truth until they make you a judge of what is disputed between them. Then find within themselves no dislike for that which you decide, and submit with full submission, which means submit happily. And if he had decreed upon them, lay down your lives or leave your home, they would not have done it, except for a few of them. But if they had done what they were instructed, it would have been better for them and firmer position for them in faith. But if they had done, Quran says, if they had done what they were instructed, this is a cure of the sickness of nifaq, of hypocrisy, that people must be of not just of words, but of action. And then we would have given them from ourselves a great reward, and we would have guided them to the straight path. This is the greatest reward. Allah says, from ourselves we would have given them a great reward and guided them to the straight path. The greatest reward is that people are guided to the straight path. And whoever obeys Allah and the Messenger, they are with whom Allah has shown favors of the prophets and the truthful, the martyrs and the righteous, and what a good company they are in. Quran stresses on the obedience of Messenger and the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we desire such eminent company, if we want to be in the company of the truthful, of the Siddiq, of the martyrs, of the righteous, and what a great company this is, then this is what we need to do, is to be obedient to Allah and to be obedient to His Messenger. Please remember that paradise has many different levels. In a hadith which is quoted from Muwatta, Imam Malik's Muwatta, Prophet ﷺ said, the inmates of paradise will see those in levels above them like you see the stars in the world, so far away, so bright, so shining. So the next ayat, that is a bounty from Allah, and sufficient is Allah as a knower. O you who believe, take precautions with weapons, either go forth in independent groups or go forth all together. Now here is an advice to Muslims that don't be a simpleton, make effort and prepare for defending this religion. Make full preparation, be on guard against danger, do military organization, have equipment, do your planning, think through very carefully. And certainly among you is he who delays. If he encounters misfortune, he says, Allah did a favor on me that I was not present among them. So you can see there is a group of people or some people who just want to have a share in credit, but no share in loss. But if good fortune comes to you from Allah, He will surely say, as if there had never been between you and Him any affection. Oh, I wish I had been with them so that I would have attained a great attainment. So the entire love of a hypocrite is worldly gains. His loyalties are neither with deen nor people of deen, nor for a cause. His loyalty is only with success. So a hypocrite is least concerned about giving sacrifice. Instead, he is only interested in worldly gains. So let those who fight in the cause of Allah, who sell the life of this world for the hereafter, and he who fights in the cause of Allah and is killed or achieves victory, we will bestow upon them a great reward. And what is the matter with you that you do not fight in the cause of Allah for the oppressed among men and women and children who say, our Lord, take us out of this city of oppressive people and appoint for us from yourself a protector and appoint for us from yourself a helper. Quran says there is no real moral excuse for you to refuse to take part in such fight, which is for the cause of Islam when Muslims are being persecuted. Those who believe fight in the cause of Allah. Those who disbelieve fight in the cause of Taghut. So fight against the allies of Shaitan. Indeed, the plot of Shaitan is very weak. Effort is being done by everyone. People who are followers of Taghut, they are putting effort. But the objective is different. People fighting for the cause of Allah, their objective is different from people fighting for the cause of Taghut. The end for both will be very different. But effort, both are doing. Have you not seen those who were told, restrain your hands from fighting and establish prayers and give zakat? But when fighting was ordained for them, a party of them feared men as they should fear Allah, or even with greater fear. They say, our Lord, why have you decreed upon us fighting, if only you had postponed it for us for a short time? Say, the enjoyment of this world is little, and the hereafter is better for he who fears Allah. And injustice will not be done to you even as much as a skin of a date stone. Allah wants Muslims, Allah really does not want Muslims to be paper tiger. Lot of noise, lot of emotions, a lot of processions, lot of fist raising, lot of pumping in the air. But when time comes for action, you begin to long for the past good old days. That was a much better time. Why is now jihad became compulsory for me? Wherever you may be, death will overtake you, even if you should be within fortified towers. But if good comes to them, they say, this is from Allah. And if misfortune falls upon them, they say, this is from you, which is blaming our Prophet. Say, all things are from Allah. So what is the matter with those people that they can hardly understand anything? See, when the love of world can really distort our value structure, and only remembrance of death and the life of grave keeps this world in the right perspective. When we are certain that this too shall end, whether it is a good time or difficult time, it will make our life much more balanced. We will not exceed limits in times of happiness nor in time of grief. Whenever good comes to you, whatever good comes to you, it is from Allah. But whatever misfortune comes to you, it is from your own selves. And we have sent down to you a messenger to the people, and sufficient is Allah as a witness. مَنْ يُطِعِ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهَ وَمَنْ تَوَلَّى فَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ عَلَيْهِمْ حَفِيظًا. He who obeys the messenger has obeyed Allah. What an ayat. It's not like he who obeys Allah obeys the messenger. It's the other way around. مَنْ يُطِعِ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهَ. He who obeys the messenger has obeyed Allah. But those who turn away, we have not sent you as a guardian over them. So this is a litmus test of our love for Prophet, is his obedience. If we love Allah, we will first show obedience to our Prophet ﷺ. And this ayat really recaps the theme of Surah Nisa. One ayah just recapping everything, and that is following the messenger, following his way. The attitude of the companions was that they left whatever they found to be against the liking of the messenger. Whatever they thought the messenger doesn't like, they would immediately, without question, leave that. And they say obedience, but when they go out from your presence, a party of them spend the night planning things other than what they say. Allah records what they plan by the night, so leave them alone and place your trust on Allah. Allah is sufficient for trusting. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. And then do they not reflect upon the Quran? If it had much from any other, if it had been from any other than Allah, they would have found in it much contradiction. Quran was revealed over 23 years and the message is so consistent. The more people contemplate, the stronger their faith will be in this book, because they will find so many topics being discussed over here, yet everything is connected, yet everything is balanced. Quran is a book which is in line with human thought process. I mean, that's the way. It's not like a standard book which has an introduction and then certain theme and some chapter and that finishes. It's how we think, how thoughts process come into our mind. And when there comes to them a news of peace or fear, they spread it around. But if they had referred it back to the messenger or those of authority among them, then those who can investigate would have known about it. If not for the favor of Allah upon you and His mercy, you would have followed the shaitan except a few. So guidance being given by Quran to the followers of this book, not to take instant decision the moment they hear some news. Instead, first be calm, verify the facts, think about it, be patient, then take a decision. Don't be reactionary. Don't react to every news. So this is so important for us today with all these WhatsApp and messaging services and everything. Don't rely on baseless and exaggerated report. Refrain from spreading rumor. Don't forward things without first knowing that they are true or not. So fight in the way of Allah. You are not responsible except for yourself, and encourage the believers to join, that perhaps Allah will restrain the might of those who disbelieve, and Allah is greater in might and stronger in punishment. Whoever intercedes for a good cause will have the reward for it, and whoever intercedes for an evil cause will have the burden from it, and Allah has power over all things. So inviting to do righteousness or inviting people to do evil deeds will result either in a reward or a burden to the person who has invited. He's the one who is also carrying a burden. So what a tragedy that a man dies and his evil deeds live on forever and growing in strength because of the wrong advice or the invitation of sin that he has given to others. The last ayat of this evening, وَإِذَا حُيِّتْهُمْ بِتَحِيَّةٍ فَحَيُّوا بِأَحْسَنَ مِنْهَا أَوْ رُدُّوهَا إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ حَسِيبًا. And when you are greeted with a greeting in return with a better than it, or at least return it in the like manner. Indeed, Allah takes into account all things. So be civil, be polite to everyone, even non-Muslims. If they greet you, return that greeting. Harsh behavior, harsh words are no good. Return greetings of everyone, and that is the etiquette that Quran expects from its followers. So barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quran al-azim wa nafana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikr al-hakim.